Welcome to Supercool, the show where the business of climate meets the future of living. Each week on Supercool, we go behind the headlines to pinpoint the stories and data accelerating the low-carbon economy in towns and cities across the U.S. and around the globe. I'm your host, Josh Dorfman. Stay up to date on Supercool by tapping the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening. Imagine for a moment you're a maintenance technician. You're in a company van en route to a warehouse owned by the national retailer that you work for. Your task when you arrive is to ensure all building systems are functioning optimally. You're normally feeling rushed because this is just one of 5 stops on your schedule today, and there's a lot of equipment to consider. But today, as you drive along the highway, you tap open an app on your phone and start talking to your assistant, Aria. Aria, you say, I'm headed to building 702. What HVAC equipment do we have there? She rattles off the names and then you follow up. Okay, so do any of the Train, Carrier, or York units need maintenance today? Yes, Unit 2 needs servicing, Aria replies. Got it, you say. Then what parts do I need to bring with me? You'll need a B70 fan belt and 6 filters, size 20 by 25 by 2, she responds. Cool. Is there anything else, Aria? Yes, RTU7 has a failed fan motor. Okay, what parts do I need to fix it, Aria? And she replies, you'll need a 1.5 horsepower fan motor. Here's the PDF for additional details. You pull into the parking lot, pop open the back of the van, grab the parts and tools, and then head inside. So how does this happen? Well, artificial intelligence isn't just on your phone, it's inside the building and every other building your company operates, constantly monitoring, measuring, and learning. Later, you're on the roof checking one of the HVAC units when you run into an error message. Aria, what's code 169 on RTU3, you ask her. Space temperature cooling alarm, she replies. The temperature isn't at the expected level for this time period. Possible causes, a failed capacitor, or low refrigerant. Now you know where to start. So after a quick investigation, you pinpoint the problem, and it's a faulty start capacitor. Aria, you say. Disable the cooling circuit and note the replacement part to be ordered. Sure thing, says Aria. How does Aria know how to handle that? Artificial intelligence. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, your boss gets an alert. Hey Bob, Aria says. A snowstorm is forecast to drop 18 inches on Boston. Last time this happened, you put your stores in unoccupancy mode. Would you like me to do that again? Yes, do it. Thanks, Aria. How does Aria know what happened last time and what to do this time? Well, it's because artificial intelligence is already embedded in those buildings, learning from every event. So today, everyone's talking about AI and how it's going to change everything. But honestly, beyond improving writing and generating cool images, the future of AI still feels a bit, shall we say, cloudy. So what about these scenarios I'm describing? Wouldn't it be cool if artificial intelligence knew exactly what was going on with all of our buildings, making maintaining them faster, more convenient, and precise? Well, the thing is, that future isn't coming someday. It's already here. Artificial intelligence has entered the building, and it's already doing the job. Aria, one of Time Magazine's 2024 Innovations of the Year, is the latest offering from BrainBox AI, a Montreal-based company whose technology now functions as the central nervous system for over 15,000 buildings in over 100 cities across 17 countries, managing more than 250 million square feet of indoor space, which is equivalent to roughly half the office space in all of Manhattan. BrainBox AI uses generative AI to predict a building's heating and cooling needs and automates how HVAC systems respond. Building sensors collect live data on temperature, humidity, sun angle, wind speed, and occupancy patterns. This real-time data feeds into a continuous feedback loop, optimizing every pump, fan, motor, and damper in the building system. Other smart technology today knows what's happening in a space in this precise moment. BrainBox AI's technology knows what's going to happen in a space 6 hours from now and takes action to adjust accordingly. Jean-Simon Venn, the founder and CTO of BrainBox AI, thinks about the technology like a time travel movie. He says, we go to the future, See how terrible it will be in 2 hours and change that. By predicting building energy needs and automating HVAC systems, BrainBox AI reduces energy consumption by up to 25% and greenhouse gas emissions by up to 40%. All of this benefit is gained without anyone having to lift a finger. Today, Sam Ramadori, CEO of BrainBox AI, joins me to share how AI isn't just changing the game, it's winning it. Sam, welcome to Supercool. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's jump in with BrainBox AI. What does it mean to be the central nervous system of a building? Let's get into that, and then we'll talk a little bit about your background, how you came to your role, which is also a fascinating part of what we want to get into today.
At the core of it all, the big categories of emissions on this planet, transportation, energy production, buildings are up there, just a huge category. And what most people aren't aware of is that you take a building and you look at its energy consumption. That's where most of the emissions are coming from. And 40%, 50% of it is the heating and cooling system of a building. So there's your massive challenge. You could just imagine the number of buildings on this planet every day, either heated or cooled. And the problem is enormous. And it has a unique problem. Like if you look at transportation, the electric vehicles are coming. They're getting cheaper. Charging stations are becoming more prevalent. The sales of electric vehicles are growing. Whether they hit a speed bump one year or not is, in my mind, irrelevant. Within a 10-year space of time, most cars sold will be electric, period. So there's a solution to the emissions from transportation. Buildings are an entirely different thing. We don't rip and replace buildings. We don't change them every 10 years like we do our cars. You got to deal with what's there. And so with that kind of need in mind, we decided to tackle that biggest problem, which is how do you make the heating and cooling system of a building more efficient? And you could have used traditional methods like try to replace equipment and stuff like that. We went straight to the control system in the building and say, can we make that thing just a hell of a lot smarter than it is operating today? So that was our core thesis. And 20 years ago, AI was not a thing. Now it is. And so now in your hands are new capabilities that can make that system more efficient at scale. And so for us, using the new tools at our fingertip, AI was our main goal. And that's transformative because even outside of buildings, the use of autonomous AI is still very, very rare. So 7 years ago, we were really pushing the envelope in terms of trying to apply something like that in the field. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think creating this control system around AI for energy efficiency, I mean, there's a couple of things you said, but I think one is we're just really coming to understand as a civilization how much energy is actually used for heating and cooling, right? That actually is such a major contributor to carbon emissions and climate change. And certainly we've known for a long time about buildings, which makes sense because we're in buildings all the time. But this sort of control system for this piece, the piece that contributes so much to the energy intensity of buildings, the cost to operate buildings, and the emissions of buildings. I mean, you tell me if you agree or disagree, but I feel like we're just becoming cognizant of how impactful that is from a climate perspective.
It's kind of like one of the ignored elements a little bit, just because when you buy a car, you spend a lot of time, you're driving it every day, you're filling up the gas if it's a gas car every day, you're charging it every day if it's an EV. It just is so present. So when we talk about it as it being a climate challenge, it's right there. It's part of what we do every day. I can assure you the last time you walked into a building and thought about its heating and cooling system was like the last time was never. Maybe your own home when you have a problem because it's cold or hot. But other than that, it's never thought of. And yet it's this sleeping giant of energy consumption in the background. I mean, the ideal situation for an HVAC system is that you walk in a building, spend the time you have to spend there and leave and never think about it for 1 second. So the challenge here is that you have this kind of hidden emissions generating massive machine in the background, and people typically are not supposed to be thinking about it.
It's a very good point. And so your opportunity and your challenge is to go into the built environment and say, hey, we have a way in this massive system running in the background that everyone depends on, that no one really wants to even think about, but is yet responsible for such a huge impact from a carbon perspective and a cost perspective. And we're going to do something about that. What has to go in? Is there hardware? Are there sensors? Talk us through how these buildings get set up with the BrainBox AI solution.
Right from the beginning, like our two words in the BrainBox team mind is scale and impact. Millions of buildings on our planet. If every time you got to go improve it, you got to get in there with trucks and ladders and this and the screwdriver, it'll never happen. So we were always focused on, can we add on top of what exists a layer of intelligence that just makes these buildings smarter, more efficient? And then we'll talk about how we want to make them integrated into the energy system of the future, because it matters. And so for us, our dream application is there's a system there, and we could plug into that system without turning one screw or adding one piece of equipment, because we can connect from the cloud. Okay, so that's on one end. Then life is life, and the reality of the world is the reality of the world. There's many control systems in buildings, and sometimes we have to install one edge device to connect to it, etc. But we never have to go in and install millions of sensors. Your building's chock full of sensors already. Your building has hundreds, if not thousands, of thermostats, control sensors, pieces of equipment. We're not looking to rip and replace or add to it. We're really looking to connect it to the cloud and then leverage AI tools so that every little decision made is a smarter decision made because of advantages of AI. We can get into that a little bit more detail. But that's really, somewhere is a range from nothing installed and purely digital to something minimal installed, still very low cost, very effective to do. Then we know we can scale to millions of buildings. And that's always been our objective.
I see. So when I'm reading about Dollar Tree and they talk about, we got this up and running in 400 stores in a matter of a month, and then we got to 600. One of the things that the energy and sustainability manager from Dollar Tree, he said something that I just thought was really cool. And I'm just going to quote it. He said, BrainBox AI helps you offset the cost from day one. Obviously, that's great. But he said it's also incredibly flexible. You get new equipment, it adapts. You move to a new location, it moves with you. You grow, it grows with you. And so there's just such a unique set of capabilities connected to what you're doing.
This is where the built environment has its particular challenges and where AI has its particular advantages. So the number one, every building is unique. Dollar Trees look similar as you move along, but they're all a little bit unique in a sense. But then you look at other buildings, and they are truly all unique. And where the AI shines, one is that it learns your building individually. So when our AI models are trained on a building, it knows that building. You cannot take those models and move it to the building next door, right? Every time we plug into a building, the AI is learning that building. That's kind of advantage number one. And then number two, the learning never stops. So the process is we plug in, use the building's data married with external data to learn your building. We then finish learning it, and then we're optimizing it in real time. 6 months later, you remodel the building, you make a major change or something. The AI recognizes that something has changed. Like what I knew before and what I was able to do before no longer works right now. And so it gets into relearning mode again. So it's not like this one thing that you program once, which is the problem of software of the past, right? You program it once and then you leave. That's not good for a building because things change. Like in a big office building, people are constantly moving in and out, reshaping the floor. Someone may change the windows to windows that are more efficient. Like there's constantly something always going on. And that power of AI to always be learning and relearning at any moment in time for the built environment is an amazing tool. It gives advantages that just never existed before in an economical way. So we learn a building. What the AI is in essence getting from that learning period. In each room of your building, the AI can now tell you what the thermal behavior of that room is going to be we use 6 hours out into the future with over 99% accuracy. You've, in essence, given a system that today only knows what the thermostat is saying right now. It doesn't even know what's going to happen in 5 minutes. A perfect view of the next 6 hours with 99% accuracy. Like it changes everything. And that capability is, again, always being kept up to par because it's relearning. Like if you change the windows, the AI is suddenly going to realize, whoa, my predictions are now horrible. I used to know 99%. Now I'm lucky if I get it 60% of the time right. Well, it will retrain itself. It literally comes out of production, goes into retraining when it's back to 99% accuracy, and then it starts controlling again. Like That adaptability, brave new world. Think of the self-driving car. Like, it only works because AI has this constantly learning and adapting capabilities that we've never seen with technology before. Right?
Yeah, that is painting a picture, as you're saying. It's remarkable. So there's the internal data that the AI is looking at. So you say, okay, you swap out the windows, or it's the occupancy on an office floor, or a new tenant comes in, they move things around. The AI is adapting and understanding. But then, did you want to say something?
I was going to say, I mean, the internal data really is what is the HVAC reading and doing every day. I mean, that's at the core of it. So there's a thermostat on your wall. It's reading the temperature every minute. It's collecting the thousands of thermostats reading temperature, sensor in your ducts. It's the fact that it turned on a piece of equipment. It's the richness of the system moving in real time. Today, it kind of happens, and then that data gets thrown away. Generally, is what it is. In that, we saw like a huge amount of data. Like, I cannot think of an industry today that destroys and throws away as much data as the built environment. Like, in this day and age where everyone's trying to get data, et cetera, there are millions of buildings out there making decisions every day, collecting readings, and then when the computer in the basement runs out of space, they just delete it. Right, sorry for interrupting, but just to give people a sense of just how much oil, they call oil, data is the new oil, how much oil is being thrown in the garbage every day, right?
No, not at all. I appreciate that. So you have all this data in the building, and then you're marrying that with external data. You're marrying that with weather data, right? And then you're marrying that with data from the utilities or the power provider.
Yeah.
What does that combination enable?
That prediction that the AI can do is dependent on that external data. So I am a room on the 5th floor of an office building that's south facing. Well, the AI is basically, it knows what the HVAC system is doing internally. It knows the temperature on the wall, knows, et cetera. It's doing these millions and millions of correlation steps with the fact that it's cloudy now, but the sun's coming out in an hour. And by the way, when that sun comes out, look what happens internally. And the wind's blowing this way. And by the way, if I use more energy in the morning, it's more expensive because I have time of day pricing relative to the afternoon. So number one, it's taking this data to create that super accurate prediction. And then it's taking that same data and says, okay, I know this room's going to be too hot in 2 hours. Today's system doesn't know that. You would have to wait 2 hours, and then the thermostat suddenly will wake up and say, whoa, it's almost 80 degrees in this room. We got a problem. Whereas the AI sits back and says, in 2 hours, I know that 80 degrees is coming. Cool. What are the things I can do? What levers can I pull right now? I could start the air flowing now. Maybe it doesn't have to be as cold. Because when you wait last minute, you have no choice but to react aggressively. Like you as an office occupier, you're not going to sit there for 2 hours waiting for your room to cool down, right? You're going to complain. So the system has to behave aggressively, pump in a lot of air, really cold. But if I know ahead of time, can I start flowing in the air more gently? Can I make it a little less cold than I had to? That's all energy savings. And what AI does like really well is look at, it's like playing chess. You and I can maybe look at 5 moves ahead. If you're lucky, if you're really good, you can think 5 moves ahead and you might think of 8 scenarios. I mean, by the time we're doing that, it's gone through 10,000 scenarios and decided like after I've reviewed 10,000 scenarios, the best one is this one, go. So that future, I know the future and I can assess 10,000 scenarios, of course, is going to be better than I don't know the future and I'm lucky if I can assess 10 scenarios.
It's just incredibly striking to hear you talk about it. When you take on a new building, who are you selling into? Who's involved in that decision? And I know you have different types of clients, different types of maybe large companies, smaller companies, but what is that sales process like?
You hit the nail on the head when you said there are different constituencies, especially within a large organization. Let's say like a retailer that has the facilities maintenance group, it has the new store opening group, it has the sustainability manager, the CFO. I mean, there's many people. And I have to say, there's no cookie cutter, this is what they're looking for. Different companies, firms will look for different outcomes as a priority today. And by the way, 2 years later, that priority is going to change. The transformation that's going on in the real estate industry that is typically not used to this kind of data transformation is we started off energy savings, but then when the data is available, we deliver just more and more services. Now we can help you measure and track your GHG emissions for your building, which used to be an exercise that took hours and days with a staff of whatever, depending on how many buildings you had, et cetera. We could do so in a far more efficient basis because we have all that data. Today, we have launched our virtual engineer for your building, Aria. Think about a virtual agent that they keep talking about in the world of generative AI. That'll support your teams on the ground in a way that renders them far more efficient today when they have no data. So imagine someone going up to a building and because there's a problem, they're discovering what the problem is. They have to log in here. They have to figure out what equipment is there. They have to go to a room, try to get the room reading, temperature, etc. Here you can ask Aria, I'm about to show up to building 34. There's a complaint on the 6th floor. Send me the charts of the temperature readings for the last 2 days. Tell me what equipment is feeding that room. Give me a sense if there's any faults in that equipment. And by the way, tell me what you think the problem is. Give me the 2 or 3 scenarios. And for each scenario, show me what piece of spare part equipment I should walk into that building with. Think of it just right there. You can just imagine the efficiency gains that are achieved from the difference there. My end point here is that we now have goodies for all people. Many people within the organization to satisfy their needs, just like your phone. I mean, it used to be just something you called with and at best text, and now look at it. Well, this platform, as we leverage the data within and outside the building, is suddenly feeding the sustainability manager with the emissions that he needs to report every year or every quarter, is feeding the facility management firm that's managing, 200 technicians on the road. Instead of going into a building blind, you're sending them in prepared and educated. The energy manager is getting his energy savings. And so definitely when we're selling, it depends on the need that the client is most interested in. But the really important thing is, like with many other industries, as soon as you get the data ready and enriched and available, you're able to feed that many sets of customers.
We were watching it on YouTube, so we'll link to it in the show notes where you show these case studies, right? You show the facilities manager in some headquarters and he's got his phone and presses the app, is talking to Ari and says, there's weather in Boston. They're expecting snow. Last time this happened 6 months ago, we did XYZ. Would you like us to do those things again? Yes, do that again. So you think, oh my gosh, someone has a national footprint or global footprint. Yeah. They can just, yes. Right, based on history, that was one. There's a sustainability manager who's talking to Ari and says, pull up the carbon intensity of my different buildings. Give me a greenhouse gas emissions report. How much carbon did I save last year as a result of BrainBox AI or per building? So those things are really cool. The one that blows me away is the last one you said, the one where you have this video of a guy who's going to do some maintenance on a giant warehouse. I'm here. What do I need to be looking at today? And they say unit number, whatever is down. It could be a capacitor or a bump fan or a sensor's not working. Here's the part you need. Here's the tools you need. That's crazy. When you think AI, that's what everyone's like, oh, well, yeah, where is that? Because that sounds like the future.
It's like you just said, where is that everywhere? Our biggest problem is data, especially in an industry like real estate. We're not talking about social media where data is everywhere, or telecom industry probably have data on all kinds of network usage and all that. We're talking hundreds of different buildings. Some of them are 10 years old. Some of them are 50 years old. And some of them have this control system. Some of them have that control system. So you got to solve that problem, number one. And the way internally we viewed it was that this new capability of autonomous optimization gave the dollars and cents for the customers to say, yes, I'm going to digitize. Because if I went up to a real estate company or a retailer and said, hey, we should plug into your buildings, collect all your data, spend the money converting that data so that AI can ingest it, bring it to the cloud, because one day there'll be something great out of it. Guess who's going to buy that? Nobody. But that autonomous AI releases the dollars to pay for that journey. Great. Then what happens? A technology like Gen AI comes around. You need the data. The generative AI just can't make it up. It needs to know what the HVAC system did, what the equipment it was, were there faults, the temperature outside, when that event happened. Like, what's the point of knowing a room got too hot if you don't know that outside it's either 100 degrees or 80 degrees? Because the problem is very different. So the core autonomous control brought together all that data, and now what we call Aria is now benefiting from and delivering to the users that system. I mean, literally what you saw in that video, our head of product coined it HVAC CSI. When you get called in, you got to spend hours trying to figure that out. We try to get rid of that and just make it more efficient. You're driving up to that building, you got a purpose, you got all the right parts in the back, you kind of know what, you might not know 100%, but man, you're at 90%. It can only be 2 or 3 things. You can go attack that problem. Probably you've saved 70% of the time. And just, Josh, so that you know, it's an industry well-known thing. There is a massive shortage of HVAC technicians on this continent. Massive. Like there's 400,000 technicians. There's 100,000 empty roles. The crime out of that situation is that only means there's a bunch of buildings out there that are just far less efficient than they should be. So for us, when we think about that efficiency gain, it means that those 400,000 people can go service twice as many buildings, therefore making them more efficient, therefore getting us closer to our end goal. This kind of stuff, it is the future, but it needs the bricks and mortar that we talk about, the foundation of data. And then in our case, there's just a real emissions reduction target at the back end of that.
Okay. I appreciate you walking me through that. So there's this massive gain in efficiency in terms of labor, freeing up resources to be able to better manage a bigger system. You're getting savings on labor. You're getting savings on the energy because you're able to maintain your systems better. You're able to do more. Really, there's just a couple of things that I want to understand. Like, what's a client paying for? How does a contract get set up?
We really tried to simplify. So this is in essence a software as a service model. If you want to try to put it in a category, you'll pay a price per square foot of a building, for instance. It'll be a fixed price. The objective is that it always be lower than the savings you're getting. And then on top of that, you're getting the benefits of GHG tracking or ARIA or. So that way you're always going cash flow positive really quick. And we will keep spinning off new services as time goes on. So you'll keep getting more and more benefits out of it. And that also reduces the risk, by the way, because customer doesn't like it, they cancel it. They haven't spent millions of dollars of CapEx up front, in which case you're stuck with it for multiple years, whatever. Like, we come, we install, we deliver a service. A year later, for some reason, you don't like it, you cancel and disconnect and everyone goes home. So we're really creating the upside opportunity and trying to reduce the risk and upfront costs as much as possible.
You de-risk it for folks. But what you're saying, Sam, too, which definitely resonates with me, you're talking about the technology in terms of the things that a business or different people in a business, wherever they say what they care about. So if I'm the facilities manager, well, obviously I want my systems to be running. If I have the P&L as the CFO, I want to be saving money, or the GM. If I'm the sustainability person, I want access to the data. I want to know what's happening in my buildings. And I want to know that it's going down, right? That we're actually cutting carbon. And if I'm a facilities manager and I'm responsible for uptime, I want to know that things are working. I want to be able to predict what's going to happen. But what I want is peace of mind. So it sounds like what you guys are really selling with AI is like, these are your business objectives. We help you match your business objectives. So you're not selling tech specs, or like, they don't have to care. They don't have to know the AI. They don't have to be technical to be able to say, okay, this is right.
We've really focused on delivering an outcome, like, to be very clear. And
which is probably why you're growing so fast, right?
Well, and look, we also, it's sometimes challenging in just making sure we communicate the value of getting to that space where you are collecting your data, you are able to use it, and you can keep developing ways to use it more and more. We know we're working on stuff that in the end will sound quite futuristic. We don't even really talk about it that much, but I mean, we have a big energy problem in front of us. We always did, and now put the generative AI causing the rapid growth in data centers, which now becomes another big energy consumption. It's now becoming a strategic priority for nations to be able to do that. And now we want to go renewable. And some nations are going faster, but they're meeting up against problems about their energy grids not being able to handle that many renewables, because renewables are not steady production. They're up and down. They're intermittent. So all of this world is moving really fast, and we are now sitting on a building in our mind that is a building before it was blind. It would need energy, consume energy, no clue what's happening in the outside world. All it knows is, I need to cool down a space, give me some electricity or heating, give me some natural gas, whatever. We feel that when we're done installed in a building, we've made a little brain on that building. And that little brain now knows, well, I know what the energy grid, I know what I'm paying for it. I know the carbon intensity of the electricity that my building uses, and as it varies throughout the day. And you could keep feeding it signals. Well, when you have 1,000 buildings in a city with that little brain on top, they could now start behaving differently together, so that when we get to a moment in time where the grid's under stress, and we know that's happening more and more, those 1,000 buildings can behave differently for the next 4 hours while that moment of stress happens. I mean, that's unthinkable. But once we've enabled one building like that, when you've enabled 1,000, well, suddenly you have a pool of buildings that will support the energy grid as we transition to the future of renewables and needing more energy for data centers and heat pumps because we want to stop using natural gas. That's the transformation. We probably don't communicate it a lot because I think sometimes going too far makes it seem too futuristic, but that's what we have.
Yeah, and we see from Supercool, I mean, we see a lot of companies trying this sort of same vision opportunity. They're saying, okay, well, you've had a grid that has been all about supply, and now and now it's like, well, wait a second, there's building, here's the demand. We have demand, but we can also be a partner to supply. If there's not enough supply, or if the supply is stressed, or it's not the optimal supply because there's too much fossil fuel, like we can kind of throttle down, right? We can be a partner to balance this thing out. So don't go build as much natural gas plants. Don't go build as much fossil fuel infrastructure. There's a kind of a brave new world we're entering, and that those collective brains, it is a lot to digest.
But the important part is, we don't have to sell people on that grandiose vision or like just install a building. You get the energy savings, you get the data, you get ARIA, you get GHG measurement. Like there's plenty of benefits. So we don't have to sell this crazy vision that people have a hard time getting their head around, never mind getting the approval of the CFO to write the check. Step one, step two, get the benefits, keep going. And as we deploy more and more, that load flexibility we were just talking about naturally happens in the background. I mean, I think that's the powerful tool of generating value with AI. You don't have to wait 10 years for this massive dream at the back end. No. Start benefiting now and move along the journey. And that's the one thing we're really trying to communicate, where in an industry where it's very transactional. I want to buy a piece of equipment. I want to buy a service. It's going to get delivered next week. That's the end of that. Like this journey of digitizing your building and getting all the benefits out of it, especially now turbocharged by AI, it's a journey. Year one, you get this. Year two, you get that. Year four, year five, I can't even tell you, but something will come out of year five. I mean, our phones have taught us that. Every year, there seems to be another benefit that I can't live without. And so changing that mindset in a traditional industry, that just start step one of the journey and benefit from the cost savings, benefit from reducing emissions, and then you'll see what comes next after that.
A couple more questions just before we get to the end of our conversation here. You come from a unique background for the role that you're in. Maybe that's the way to say it. Meaning you don't come from an AI kind of technical background, having been building this company over the last number of years. Can you just talk about that? Because I do think it's very interesting as a business person who steps in, sees an opportunity, which was very different than what you were doing operationally in the past. Give us a little color there.
It's one of those moments in times, serendipity. You probably had an important role to play here, but I met with Jean-Simon Venn, who was today our CTO, original founder, idea person behind BrainBox AI. And I met him after they had been doing some kind of stealth mode, figuring out if this can actually be done with a very small team. And my background is private equity, typically investing in traditional businesses, some of them manufacturing, industrial, et cetera. And for me, the connection was, you own a manufacturing facility of whatever kind, you want to make some efficiency gains, let's say even energy efficiency gains. Typically, you're pulling together a team of 10 people. You get a budget approved of $5 million to get new equipment in or try a new manufacturing process. It's disruptive to your process. And by the way, you're trying to get 3% of energy savings. I mean, that was my past. Suddenly I meet Jean-Simon and he's telling me, well, what we're going to do is install this AI layer that plugs into the existing system. You're not ripping, you're not replacing, you're not spending a bunch of money. And we're leveraging the new capabilities of AI. And we hope to get 10, 20% savings. Like, I mean, I fell off my chair. And it's only because of my background that is not technical AI software. It was the industrial side. I knew how hard it was. I knew how challenging it could be to make something like that happen. And when I saw that, wow, this new AI capability gives us tools to get there faster in a more cost-effective way, that then also opens a whole slew of other services because the data is unleashed. I mean, for me, it was like, okay, we got to give it a shot. And I had that moment in time where I go home and say, I think I want to do this. And then I got to talk to my partner and say, hey, by the way, I'm quitting my stable job and I'm going to try to join this crazy little group of people. And I think they can, so I lived through that. And, fortunately, 5-6 years later, here we are. But that was really that catalyst. And what I find interesting is I came out of university during the dot-com bubble. To me, that was tech for the digital world. Today, with climate being a main motivator, AI, what we're entering is a world of tech for the physical world. And I think that connectivity is not that easy. People on the physical end of things are so far away from Silicon Valley that world needs to be bridged. So I think I'm sitting here as an example of that. Maybe we'll see these kind of career changes much more going forward because we need tech to solve the physical now. I mean, great that I got AI helping me on my phone again. I keep showing you my phone, but that's not going to solve our climate problem. It's not going to save our planet. I frankly think this example will be played over not as a unique story, but it may be the course of things because that's what we need to achieve.
That just resonates so deeply with me. I think about, we had on this woman, Ritu Narayan, who runs a company called Zoom, and they are really transforming in the US student transportation, school buses, and a whole system, right? That's just completely anachronistic. I mean, my kids have the same experience riding the bus as my grandparents had. Right? Just hasn't changed. Yeah. But it's the same thing. And I hadn't thought about through that lens, Sam, until you said that. If you have to take this tech and apply it to the physical world, and a world that's not used to having tech.
That's right.
And that adoption and that convincing, right, is, gosh, it is just it's such a process. I appreciate that. I'm going to think about that more. The last thing that I wanted to make sure to touch upon is there's big news out of BrainBox AI over the last couple of months. You've gone through a pretty amazing acquisition with Train. Can you talk about what's unfolded and what that means for the future of BrainBox AI and further deployment and what your plans look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So Train was a partner before the acquisition that we had been working with for at least 2 or 3 years. And our objective, so we're plugging into systems in the field. The big players of these systems, Train is one of them. You have people like Honeywell, Johnson Controls, Siemens. We're plugging into their systems is the way we roll out our technology. And over time, we want to create partnerships with these companies so that we can be more integrated directly into their platform. And that's what we started working on with Train 3 years ago. And about a year and a bit ago, after that work, they launched Train Autonomous Control powered by BrainBox AI, basically connecting our clouds together. Remember that at the beginning, I said we want to deploy with zero hardware, zero screw being turned. Well, there's no better way than the clouds being connected. And if the buildings that are connected to their cloud, literally, I don't want to say as easy as flip a switch, but close enough. No one goes to that building. We could flip the switch and get them activated on the AI platform. So we had worked closely with them over the years. And ultimately, the relationship got closer and closer. And on our side, we only have an impact if we could scale to many millions of buildings. And so that type of partnership, Train has a forward-looking view to sustainability. Like you just go to their website, they're screaming sustainability. They believe it to their core. We obviously were born that way, believing it to the core. And so there was a good partnership. And so we closed the acquisition about a month ago. And the objective is just to be able to benefit from the platform and scale faster and faster to the many million of buildings we need to get them to make a difference. So we closed that transaction a month ago, and now we're working closer and closer together and integrating more and more.
Sam, thank you for coming on. We're going to have you back because one, we're going to watch as this continues to unfold, but there's just so much more to get into. It's absolutely fascinating. I think, like you said, this very real use case that's actually here today, right, of the promise of AI. And we hear so much about data centers and AI and HPC AI and infrastructure and what's it going to mean, and understandably, right, solving the energy equation around AI and is there a carbon impact? Can it help save the planet? And here we have this whole conversation we're having today about greenhouse gas reduction, efficiency. It's so much for people to take in that really forces almost like cognitive dissonance, because I think a lot of people kind of want to latch onto this narrative of like, oh, AI, it's energy intensive, data centers, depending on where you sit in the spectrum. And it's hard to then say, well, wait a second, check this company out, right? Check out what they're doing.
It's a tough one for us. Or obviously, we're communicating AI as a tool and whatnot, and then in the background, everything you just described. But like the energy it takes to create one cat video, because you've asked generative AI to give you a cat video, is like multiple times more than it takes the energy we use to optimize the buildings. Like we're using just digits, numbers, temperature readings, fan speeds, etc. It pales in comparison to just the energy used to create one video online. And so while the world is looking at the cat videos and playing with this stuff, and we're in the background using that little bit to make a real impact. It's not easy to communicate, but that's the reality of things. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as that's the expression. Yes,
That's the expression, right.
we got to be mindful that this is a powerful technology and there are very, very impactful applications to it. Let's not let that side of it cloud the opportunity, right?
Yeah. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is that, just hearing BrainBox AI and what you're doing, we want to talk to you because there's this energy efficiency. I don't know if it's 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, but next generation energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, carbon emission reduction. But yet, if that were it alone, I mean, to us, that wouldn't be super cool. It's also enabling this more amazing, it's more comfortable to be in the building. You run a better business. Like, life actually gets better the more you implement BrainBox AI. And so that, I just think that's I don't even know the word. That's the charm of it all, right? That's what just makes it so delightful.
Yeah, and I think we tend to think about this transition we need to go through on a broader climate perspective and think all sacrifice. Well, man, like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, when electric cars will have been on our road 15 years, go take a look at the repair bills and how much lower they are and how less complex it is to manage your car and not so many moving pieces and not having to change your oil. Like, yeah, electric cars have that, but we haven't yet lived it, but it's a fraction as hard than to manage your existing vehicle today. But we tend to look at everything as a sacrifice only because it's changed, because it's new, because it's not perfect at the beginning. Yeah, patience. It will get a lot better than what we have today. And I could say that that'll happen across multiple sectors of our daily lives, of our industries, etc. It's just hard, right? Change is hard.
Well, right. Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really terrific to have a chance to speak with you.
Thank you for having me, Josh. Really appreciate it.